Boy returns from death with a horrifying message from Jesus. Lucas had always been the adventurous type. At just 12 years old, he was the kind of boy who could turn even the most ordinary day into a quest for discovery. Whether it was climbing trees in his backyard or exploring the small creek near his house, Lucas had a knack for making everything feel alive with possibility. His laughter was infectious, his curiosity endless, and his energy boundless. But no one could have predicted how a seemingly normal afternoon would change his life and the lives of those around him forever. It was a bright, cloudless day when Lucas hopped on his bicycle, ready to meet his friends at the park. The sun glinted off the handlebars as he sped down the familiar streets of his quiet suburban neighborhood. Everything felt so normal, so routine, that the chain of events that followed seemed almost impossible to comprehend. As Lucas approached an intersection, a delivery truck came barreling down the road. The driver, distracted for just a split second, didn't see Lucas crossing. The screeching of tires was deafening. Time slowed to a crawl. Lucas turned his head just in time to see the massive vehicle bearing down on him, its horn blaring. There was no time to react, no time to scream. The impact was sudden and violent, sending Lucas flying through the air like a rag doll. He hit the pavement with a sickening thud, his bicycle crumpled beneath the truck's tires. Witnesses screamed and rushed to his side, their faces pale with horror. Paramedics arrived within minutes, their movements quick and efficient as they worked to stabilize Lucas. His pulse was faint, his breathing shallow. The EMTs exchanged grim glances, silently acknowledging the odds were not in his favor. Lucas's parents, who had rushed to the scene after a frantic phone call, were inconsolable. His mother clutched her husband's arm, tears streaming down her face as she begged God to save her son. In the ambulance, Lucas's heart stopped. The monitor let out a steady, unrelenting tone, signaling cardiac arrest. The paramedics worked desperately to revive him, administering CPR and delivering shocks with a defibrillator. But Lucas was gone, or so it seemed. Lucas didn't feel the pain anymore. The chaos and noise of the accident faded away, replaced by a profound silence. He opened his eyes, or at least it felt like he did, and found himself standing in a place that defied explanation. The air shimmered with an otherworldly light, so pure and radiant that it seemed to touch every corner of his being. Colors he couldn't describe danced around him, shifting and flowing like liquid energy. The ground beneath his feet was soft and warm, though it didn't feel like earth or stone. It was as if he was standing on the very fabric of existence. Lucas wasn't afraid. In fact, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace, a warmth that wrapped around him like a comforting embrace. He looked around, trying to make sense of where he was. There were no walls, no ceiling, no horizon, just infinite light stretching in every direction. It was beautiful, but also humbling. Lucas felt small and insignificant, yet deeply connected to everything around him. A voice broke the silence, and Lucas turned toward its source. It wasn't a voice like the ones he knew. It didn't come from a mouth or carry through the air. It resonated inside him, filling every part of his being with its power and gentleness. "Lucas," the voice said, and in that single word, Lucas felt a love so profound it brought tears to his eyes. He knew, without needing to be told, that he was in the presence of someone extraordinary. Before him stood a figure bathed in light. The man's features were kind and strong, his eyes filled with wisdom and compassion. Lucas didn't need to ask who he was. He knew instinctively that he was standing before Jesus. "Lucas," Jesus said again, his voice filled with both gravity and kindness. "You have come here for a reason. Your time is not yet over, but there is something you must understand before you return." Lucas was overwhelmed. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, but the words caught in his throat. Jesus seemed to understand. He placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder, and a wave of calm washed over him. "There is much I need to show you," Jesus said, "and there is much I need you to tell others." Lucas nodded, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with a sense of purpose he didn't fully understand yet. Jesus began to walk, and Lucas followed, the landscape around them shifting and changing with every step. It was as if they were moving through time and space, glimpsing moments and places that felt both familiar and alien. "What you see here is only a fraction of what exists," Jesus said, gesturing to the vibrant, ever-changing scenery. "But there are things happening in your world that will shape the future of all creation. And there is one name you must remember." Lucas's heart skipped a beat. "What name?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Elon Musk," Jesus replied, his tone steady and deliberate. Lucas furrowed his brow, confused. He had heard the name before. His dad often talked about the man's inventions and companies, but he couldn't understand why someone like Elon Musk would matter in a place like this. "Why him?" Lucas asked. "What does he have to do with anything?" Jesus smiled, a mixture of patience and urgency in his expression. "He is a man with great potential," he said. "His actions will influence the path humanity takes. But potential alone is not enough. Choices must be made, and those choices will ripple through the fabric of existence." Lucas tried to process what he was hearing, but the weight of it was almost too much to bear. Jesus placed a hand over Lucas's heart, and a surge of clarity filled his mind. He didn't understand everything, not yet, but he knew that this moment, this message, was something he would carry with him for the rest of his life. "You must remember this, Lucas," Jesus said, "and when the time comes, you must share what you have seen. The world needs to hear it." Before Lucas could respond, the light around him began to shift, growing brighter and more intense. He felt himself being pulled backward, away from Jesus, away from the radiant landscape. He wanted to stay, to ask more questions, but he knew deep down that his time here was over. And then, with a jolt, Lucas opened his eyes. Lucas stood frozen, staring at Jesus, trying to process the name he had just heard. Elon Musk. It echoed in his mind like the chime of a bell that wouldn't stop reverberating. Of all the things he expected in this place, this glowing, ethereal realm, this name wasn't one of them. He wanted to ask why, to demand an explanation, but Jesus raised his hand gently, as if to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in Lucas's head. "You wonder why this name is important," Jesus said, reading Lucas's unspoken question. His voice was soothing, yet carried an undeniable weight. "You are not alone in asking that. Even he does not yet fully understand the role he plays in the grand design." Lucas felt a strange mixture of awe and confusion. He had heard Elon Musk's name at school, on the news, in conversations his dad had with friends. A genius, an innovator, a man who seemed to live in the future while everyone else was stuck in the present. But why would Jesus, standing in a place beyond time and space, care about someone like that? Lucas managed to stammer, What does he do that's so important?" Jesus turned slightly, and the shimmering light around them began to shift. Suddenly, it wasn't just light anymore. It was scenes, images unfolding like a living tapestry. Lucas saw Elon Musk, not as a distant celebrity, but as a man consumed by ideas, driven by something almost otherworldly. He saw Musk working late into the night, sketching designs, testing rockets, speaking with a passion that could ignite whole rooms. Then the vision expanded, showing gleaming cities powered by clean energy, cars gliding silently through streets, and humans walking on the surface of Mars under domes that glittered like jewels in the sunlight. "These are the possibilities he unlocks," Jesus said. "He dreams of a world where humanity reaches beyond its limits, where the impossible becomes possible." Through his work, he inspires millions to believe that the future can be better than the past. Lucas felt his heart lift at the sight of these incredible advancements. But then the images shifted again. The cities began to decay, their once bright lights flickering and dimming. The Mars domes cracked, their surfaces coated with red dust. People fought in the streets over scraps of resources, their faces twisted with anger and desperation. Lucas's stomach churned as he watched the unraveling of everything he had just seen. But dreams, Jesus continued, his voice quieter now, are fragile things. They can be twisted, misused, or abandoned. The power that builds these wonders can also destroy them. Lucas turned to look at Jesus, panic rising in his chest. What do you mean? How could that happen? Jesus' gaze was steady, filled with both sorrow and hope. Because the future does not rest on one person alone, no matter how brilliant or determined they may be. Elon Musk's influence is great, but it is not infallible. He is human, and like all humans, he must choose which path he walks. Will his work bring light to the world, or will it cast shadows too deep to escape? That choice is not his alone. It belongs to all of humanity. The vision shifted again, showing moments of decision. Musk standing at a podium, addressing a crowd. Musk in a boardroom, debating a choice that could change the course of history. Musk alone, staring out at the stars, the weight of responsibility etched into his face. Lucas felt a pang of empathy for the man, someone he had barely thought about before now. Does he know? Lucas asked. Does he realize what's at stake? Jesus' expression softened. He senses it, but he does not fully see it. That is why this message is so important. The world must understand that every choice matters. Every step forward must be taken with wisdom and humility, not just ambition. Lucas nodded, though his mind still reeled. But how do I tell people this? They'll never believe me. Jesus placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder, and warmth spread through him like sunlight breaking through a storm. You don't need to make them believe. You only need to share what you've seen. The truth has a way of planting seeds in the hearts of those who are ready to hear it. Lucas wanted to say more, but the vision shifted again, this time pulling him deeper into a new scene. He saw the earth as if from space, its blue and green surface glowing with life. But as he watched, the planet began to change. Fires raged across forests, oceans swelled and consumed coastlines, and the skies turned dark with smog. He felt the weight of the damage humanity had done, and it crushed him with its enormity. Then, just as he thought he couldn't bear it any longer, the image began to brighten. People came together, working side by side to heal the earth. Forests regrew, waters cleared, and the air became clean and crisp again. Lucas realized this was the future Jesus had shown him before, the one Elon Musk's work could help make possible, but only if humanity rose to the challenge. This is why balance is so important, Jesus said, his voice steady and calm. Technology is a tool, a gift, but it must be guided by love and compassion. Without those, even the greatest advancements can lead to destruction. Lucas felt a surge of determination, his fear melting away. I'll tell them, he said, his voice firm. I'll tell everyone. Jesus smiled, the light around him glowing even brighter. I know you will, Lucas. And remember, you are not alone in this. Every person has the power to make choices that shape the future. Together, those choices can create a world filled with hope. Lucas felt the light pulling him again, the world around him blurring and fading. As he was drawn back toward the life he had momentarily left behind, Jesus' words echoed in his mind, anchoring themselves deep within his soul. The future wasn't set in stone. It was a living thing, shaped by every action, every decision, every moment of love or fear. Lucas knew the weight of what he had been shown, but he also knew the strength of what humanity could accomplish when it chose to walk the path of light. Lucas felt the pull of the world drawing him back, but before he left, Jesus spoke one last time, his words resonating deep within Lucas's heart. Remember this, Lucas, the responsibility of humanity does not rest on one person alone. It is the collective choice of all who walk the earth. Share what you've seen, but know that your actions, no matter how small, carry the same weight as the greatest leaders. Every life matters in shaping the future. As the light around him began to dim, Lucas felt a strange mix of emotions. The sense of peace and clarity from this place of divine presence filled him, but the gravity of what he had been shown was overwhelming. Images of the future, both beautiful and terrifying, played in his mind like an endless reel. He saw faces, countless faces, some hopeful, others lost, and in every one of them he saw the potential for change. He didn't fully understand how it all connected, but he knew the weight of the message was far greater than him. Then, just as suddenly as he had arrived, Lucas felt himself falling. It wasn't a terrifying plummet, but more like being gently carried by a current. The radiant light faded, replaced by a swirling, inky darkness. For a brief moment, he felt the tug of two worlds, one of divine warmth, the other cold and fragile. Then came the sound of voices, muffled at first, but growing louder. The sensation of weight returned to his body, and with it, pain. His chest ached as if a heavy weight were pressing on it. His head throbbed, and every breath burned. But he was alive. Lucas opened his eyes, the blinding fluorescent lights of the hospital piercing through the haze of his return. The faces of doctors and nurses hovered above him, their expressions a mix of shock and relief. He could hear their frantic voices, though their words felt distant, like an echo in a cavern. "He's back," one of them said. "We've got a pulse." Another added, "It's a miracle." His mother's face came into view, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She gripped his hand tightly, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Lucas, you're here. Oh, thank God, you're here." Lucas wanted to respond, to tell her everything, but his body felt weak and heavy. His voice wouldn't come, and his mind was still spinning from what he had experienced. He could only manage a faint smile before exhaustion overtook him, pulling him into a deep sleep. When Lucas woke again, the room was quiet. The steady beeping of machines and the soft hum of the air conditioning were the only sounds. His body ached, but the sharp pain had dulled to a manageable throb. He looked around, taking in the sterile hospital room with its white walls and pale blue curtains. His mother was sitting in a chair by his bed, her hands clasped tightly together as she prayed under her breath. When she noticed he was awake, she rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face. "Lucas," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought I'd lost you." He wanted to reassure her, to tell her he was fine, but his mind was still grappling with everything he had seen. How could he explain it? How could he find the words to describe a place that defied description, a message so profound it felt almost too heavy to carry? He decided to start small. "I'm okay, Mom," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm here." She hugged him tightly, careful not to disturb the wires and tubes connected to him. "We've been praying so hard for you," she said. "The doctor said it was a miracle you came back." Lucas nodded, though he said nothing. It wasn't just a miracle, it was a mission. He had been given a responsibility, a truth that he couldn't ignore. But how could he begin to share it? How could he explain what Jesus had shown him without people thinking he had lost his mind? The weight of it pressed on him, but he reminded himself of Jesus' words. "You don't need to make them believe. You only need to share what you've seen." Over the next few days, Lucas began to recover physically, but his mind was restless. The images of the future Jesus had shown him replayed in his thoughts constantly. The beautiful, thriving world built on unity and innovation. The dark, broken one that fell into chaos. And in the center of it all, the reminder that every choice mattered. Not just the choices of people like Elon Musk, but the choices of every individual. One evening, as the sun set and cast warm golden light across his hospital room, Lucas found himself staring out the window. He thought about his friends, his school, the world outside this room that seemed to go on as if nothing had happened. He realized that, to everyone else, this was just an accident he had survived. No one could see the truth he carried now. It was both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because he felt so small compared to the enormity of the message. Liberating because, in some way, he knew it wasn't just his burden to bear. He thought about what Jesus had shown him, the way humanity could come together to heal the earth, to build a better future. It wasn't about waiting for one person to save the world. It was about everyone playing their part, no matter how small. And Lucas knew his part started with telling his story. As the days turned into weeks, Lucas began sharing bits and pieces of his experience with his family. He told them about the light, the overwhelming love he had felt, and the message that humanity had the power to shape its own destiny. He left out the name Elon Musk at first, unsure of how to explain it, but he saw the way his parents and siblings listened intently, their eyes wide with wonder and curiosity. "It sounds like you were meant to come back," his father said one evening, his voice heavy with emotion. "Like you have something important to do." Lucas nodded, his heart swelling with determination. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He had been given a second chance for a reason, and he wasn't going to waste it. Lucas opened his eyes one morning to the soft hum of hospital equipment, the light filtering through the window, casting a pale glow on the room. He felt stronger now, the physical pain from the accident fading, though the weight in his heart remained. He had woken up many times in this room, surrounded by the comfort of his family, but this morning was different. The quiet held a sense of expectation, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for him to act. His body had healed enough for him to go home, but Lucas knew that leaving the hospital wasn't the end of his journey. In some ways, it was only the beginning. As the nurses prepared his discharge papers and his parents gathered his belongings, Lucas stared out the window. The city stretched before him, bustling and alive. Cars moved along busy streets, and people walked with purpose, caught up in their own lives. They had no idea how close he had come to leaving this world, or what he had brought back with him. For the first time since waking up, Lucas felt a pang of doubt. How could he, just a boy, carry the weight of a message that felt too enormous to explain? How could he convince anyone to listen? On the drive home, his parents tried to fill the silence with reassuring words, talking about how lucky he was and how they'd be there for him, no matter what. Lucas nodded, offering small smiles, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about what Jesus had shown him, the visions of a future that could either flourish or crumble, the choices that would determine everything. He remembered the name Jesus had spoken so clearly, Elon Musk. It still felt strange to him, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, but he knew it was important. He knew it was something he couldn't ignore. When they arrived home, Lucas was greeted with balloons and cards from neighbors and friends, a reminder of how deeply his absence had been felt. His younger sister hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We thought we lost you," she whispered. Lucas hugged her back, his heart aching with the realization of how close that had come to being true. But he hadn't been lost. He had been sent back. As the days passed, Lucas tried to settle back into his old routine. His friends visited, bringing stories of school and the neighborhood, trying to make him laugh. Teachers sent home assignments and notes, encouraging him to take his time recovering. On the surface, life seemed to return to normal. But Lucas knew he wasn't the same. The boy who had left home that day on his bicycle had been filled with carefree curiosity. The boy who returned carried a truth so heavy it kept him awake at night. One evening, as Lucas sat at the dinner table with his family, the words spilled out before he could stop them. "I saw Jesus," he said, his voice trembling. The room fell silent. His parents exchanged a glance, their faces a mix of concern and disbelief. His sister stared at him wide-eyed, her fork frozen mid-air. "You... what?" his father finally asked, leaning forward. Lucas took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "When I was gone, when my heart stopped, I went somewhere else. I saw Jesus, and he talked to me." The words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. His mother reached for his hand, her grip firm and steady. "Lucas, are you sure it wasn't a dream? Sometimes when people go through something traumatic—" "It wasn't a dream," Lucas interrupted, his voice stronger now. "I know what I saw. I know what I heard." His family listened as he told them everything about the light, the overwhelming love, the visions of the future. He described the thriving cities, the crumbling world, and the name that Jesus had spoken so clearly: Elon Musk. By the time he finished, his parents were silent, their faces unreadable. Lucas's sister looked at him with a mixture of awe and confusion. "Why would Jesus tell you about Elon Musk?" she asked, her voice small. "I don't know," Lucas admitted, "but he said his work is important, that it could help humanity, or it could hurt it, depending on the choices we make. It's not just about him, it's about all of us." His father let out a long breath, rubbing his temples. "Lucas, I don't know what to say. That's a lot to process." "I don't need you to believe me," Lucas said, echoing Jesus' words. "I just need to share what I saw." Over time, Lucas began to share his story with others. At first, it was just close friends and family, people who knew him well enough to listen without judgment. Some were skeptical, chalking it up to the effects of his near-death experience. Others were moved, their eyes filling with tears as they listened to Lucas describe the love and light he had felt. But as word spread, more people began to take notice. Teachers invited him to speak at school assemblies, and local community groups asked him to share his experience. Lucas always told the story the same way, sticking to the truth of what he had seen and heard. He didn't embellish or try to convince anyone. He simply shared what he had been given, trusting that those who needed to hear it would understand. And they did. People began to talk, not just about Lucas's story, but about the choices they made in their own lives. Conversations about responsibility, compassion, and the future became more common. Lucas realized that the message wasn't just about Elon Musk or the big decisions made by world leaders. It was about the small, everyday choices that added up to something greater. One night, as Lucas lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt since his accident. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he had done what Jesus had asked of him. He had shared the message. And in doing so, he had planted seeds of hope and change. The world didn't transform overnight. But as Lucas watched the conversations grow and the changes take root, he realized that wasn't the point. The future wasn't about instant results. It was about the journey, the countless steps taken by countless people, all moving toward a brighter, better world. And Lucas knew deep in his heart that he had been a part of it.